So now let's summarize what we've learned about visualizing data and put it into practice. Because oftentimes what can be challenging is, given a set of data, is determining what type of visualization would be best. And so that's what we're going to practice with in this summary video. So just as a recap, we talked about two different goals of data visualization. The first is really part of the EDA process. It's really your own way of digging into the data, understanding the data, starting to perhaps look at some possible hypotheses or things that you may want to explore about the data. And this is a very lightweight, iterative, and flexible process. And so you can use libraries in Python that are built for this. There's Matplotlib is great for this. There's also some of the built-in plotting tools that's built directly into data frames work great with this. Then the second goal is much more selective and highly editorial. And this is when you're ready to communicate your results or conclusions to others. And so this is, again, where you want to be fine-tuning your plots. Matplotlib is also great for this, but this is where Seaborn or Plotly will also come in handy if you want to do more interactive type plots. And this is just to emphasize the fact that visualizations are not just the matter of making pretty pictures. They really do hit these two different goals. And so depending on what you're trying to do with the visualization, you want to think carefully about what visualization you're choosing and how you're presenting it. So to practice that, in this table on the left, I have different combinations of features and dimensions. And I want you to think about, for example, if you have quantitative single feature, what types of visualizations could you use? And so here are possible ones on the right. You can select more than one in a given row, and these visualizations may be used more than once for different rows. So go ahead, put it on pause, see if you can fill out this table. So let's start with the first one. Let's look at quantitative and one feature. So standard way to start with this is a histogram. That's what I have. Here, I'm not doing a bar chart because this is quantitative, not qualitative, right? So this is something where I would split this up and use a histogram. Violin plot is also great for this scenario. You could use a density curve over the histogram, right? So just imagine coming up with an approximate density curve like this. And we could also do a box plot. So those are all great options when you have one quantitative feature. Okay, what about one qualitative feature? So in this case, right, this is really where we're looking at a bar chart. And I'm going to be careful here because I have two bar charts on this, A and C, but there is a difference. If you notice, C is giving me a count. And so that's what I can get when I have a single feature. A is actually plotting two different variables. It's plotting education versus weekly earnings. It's not a count. And so A would not work in this case where I only had one feature. We'll see where A comes into play. But for now, just C is actually going to be, out of the options available here, the one that we would use for one qualitative feature. Okay, what about two quantitative features? So this is where scatter plots are great. So I always kind of start with a scatter plot when I have that case. The other case that may be useful is a line graph, but that's only going to be if your scatter plot passes the vertical line test, right? Because you're not going to be able to do a line graph if a given input has more than one output. And then the other thing you could do is a side-by-side box plot, but that would be if one of your variables has a few discrete values, which you would use on the x-axis. So if, for example, that's what we had here on this plot in J, it's like number of bedrooms, which is quantitative, but it's discrete. And so I can plot number of bedrooms versus sale price using side-by-side box plots. Okay, so I have G, H, and J there. What about two qualitative features? All right, so this is going to actually be the last two. This is great for doing side-by-side bar charts. Again, you can see out of my qualitative features, my large, medium, small, this is still giving me a proportion. Or I could do overlaid line graphs, which is basically the same information as this one, but I'm just plotting points at the top of each of these bars and then connecting them. So either of those would work when you have two qualitative features. And last but not least, one quantitative and one qualitative. All right, so this was actually the case that we saw here because I had a qualitative education feature and then a quantitative weekly earnings. And so I can do this type of bar chart here. The other thing that works great with this is, well, you can do scatter plots actually. The quantitative one, again, they're gonna look like these striped kind of scatter plots right there. It's gonna look like that. So you can do you can do side-by-side box plots, which again, would help with any overplotting you might have here. We could do side-by-side box plots, side-by-side violin plots. Those work great as well. Overlaid density curves could also work here if you have just a few different categories in your qualitative variable. It'll start to be pretty intense if you have a lot of categories. So here I just had 3, which worked well. Some other overlaid histograms, again, will work as long as you don't have too many in those categories in your qualitative variable. And let's see. Yep, those are it. All of those are the great options for when we have one quantitative and one qualitative. So you have quite a bit of different visualization options at your disposal. Again, to use depending on the context and depending on what you're trying to communicate.